So I have probably the most fun job in the world. I get to travel around and meet investors and entrepreneurs, and what happens is everybody you meet is passionate and excited about what they do, so it's very energizing. Are we going to have slides? Oh, okay, I'll speak to the first. Oh, there you go. Very good, very good. So the word innovation is here behind me. I thought I would define how we think about innovation because it's maybe these days a slightly overused word. So you can have innovations in many different areas. They could be technical, they could be business model, they could have to do with how you treat your citizens. But in all cases, these things are in context. So our researchers invent stuff, but that's not innovation unless it's in the context of what a business or a city or an institution is doing. We believe innovation should be very open and very collaborative, and for us, of course, it's a very global business. I also mentioned multidisciplinary. You know, a lot of the jobs today require that people understand each other's jobs, and a lot of the universities are doing things that are more cross-pillar to promote the idea of sharing ideas and understanding other kinds of jobs. This is particularly true in clean tech and biotech and life sciences and so forth. So, and the theme of open innovation, IBM has, for quite some time now, since the late 90s, had the notion that you should find innovation anywhere it appears. And so we actively seek it out in places outside our own institution and even outside our business partner relationships. We spend something like $5 or $6 billion a year on our own research and R&D in many labs around the world, but that pales in comparison to what the VCs here and around the globe are spending, and angel investors and so forth. And so we know we don't invent everything, and we know we don't do all of the innovation in the world. And so you can see on the for you, the right-hand side of that slide, our relationships with early and other stage venture capital firms are important because that gives us a lens into where money is going, where adoption is by customers, maybe in ways that we wouldn't see through our own executives, and then the relationships we can have with the companies they've invested in and the kinds of companies that are supported here. So, you know, this is not just an exercise in you know, getting to know a community, and it's not just an exercise in you know, what's the coolest new thing. There's real business being done here. Our company makes a high proportion of its revenue from business partner relationships, and since the venture group was started in the year 2000, we've added over 1,500 business partners through the relationships with VCs and through the relationships with organizations like Plug and Play and TIE and SV Forum and so forth. And we've also, ourselves, quite an acquirer. We haven't bought 50 companies in the last year, but we buy 1 or 2 every month and have been doing that for quite some time. And a third of those companies have been venture-backed. So I thought you might like to know what we're spending our money on, because that will give you maybe an idea of how you map onto that. So our CEO had announced to Wall Street what our roadmap is for the year 2015, what we do between, you know, the last, in a 5-year period ending in 2015. And you can see the amount of revenue growth as expected from these growth initiatives, $20 billion of revenue. And the initiatives fall into a couple of buckets. A couple of these things I would call enabling technologies, so analytics, especially predictive analytics these days, and we could talk about that later perhaps, and cloud computing as a delivery model. With these 2 things, you can, as a client, as a business, do things that you couldn't do before. And so that's very exciting for a lot of our clients. And then, of course, growth markets. Kanice mentioned that we run into each other around the world. In the last year, we've run our Smart Camp competitions, which I will explain in a minute, in Rio and in Istanbul and in Shanghai. And we'll be doing more this year in other places. So the growth markets are very important. And then our Smarter Planet initiative, which I will also explain in a moment. So if you have a venture capital group like IBM does, what you're really trying to do is match what's being spent internally with what you guys are spending externally and find areas of intersection and mutual interest. And this group was started specifically to support growth businesses, and that's why these relationships are important. I should mention, which I didn't mention before, that we have a strategic and relationship model. We call it a venture capital group, but we do not put money into startups. I will give you my business card, but don't ask me for money. We do have some investments in some of the venture firms in the Valley and around the world. So that's the only way we place capital. So, you know, things like mobile computing, what's happening with networking, the consumerization of IT. I mean, you're all familiar with these areas. These are places where IBM's strategy and growth intersects with where money is flowing in the world. So to get back to Smarter Planet and really on the theme of the Internet of Things, we think that some of the biggest opportunities for ourselves and for the companies that we work with in the market are in this area where the business context is really supported by the intersection of physical and digital things. And that really changes the game. This is a new way of doing business and of thinking, and it's actually very important to city and state governments. So you've probably seen information about these kinds of thoughts, but there's been a sort of a disruption, I guess, in the market because there's so much broadband. The world is very interconnected. Stuff that we imagined would be fun, you know, in 2000 didn't work very well. Now it does work, and you can connect machines and people and so forth. The instrumentation is shocking to me. I mean, you know, every soldier has an IP address. Every car has a GPS system in it. Every city has sensors all around the city. And so the world is becoming so instrumented. And some of the sensors are dumb and some of them are smart. But in either case, they're collecting and distributing information. And the way in which you become intelligent is to take that information, use the analytics, and get some kind of outcome from that that could be very compelling. And so, for example, I mean, there's a lot of different sectors in which this can apply, but you know, you can manage the heating and lighting and cooling in this building through sensor networks and through the kind of Smarter Planet theme. You could do it for the city of Sunnyvale and monitor the traffic and optimize traffic flow. You could monitor the water systems and check for leakage. If there's a wind farm, you could monitor the turbines and predict when they'll need maintenance. I mean, this just happens in every manageable scenario. And that's why it's so exciting, because you can just look around you in the world and think about places that this kind of notion could apply. And so really the environment in which a lot of this massive change in society and business and technology is happening is in the context of a city. I mean, these numbers are shocking to me. It's already 5 years ago that half of the world's population was living in cities, half, and growing, and will be a much bigger portion of that, you know, in the next few decades. Every minute for the next 20 years, India will have to create new cities, and China is creating new cities. There are not enough places for people to live when they leave these rural areas. And so these new cities and existing cities are trying to manage their relationship with their citizens. They're trying to create skilled jobs. They're trying to manage the roadways and the housing and the infrastructure. And it's shocking to me how many cities are now trying to become what they call digital or smart. We call it smart. A lot of the cities say we want to become digital. And so they can drive sustainable growth, and a lot of this is about economic growth. We talk about sustainability in another context, and clean tech and so forth, and they want that too. But they're really trying to create a kind of a growth and a kind of economy that helps them and their citizens to have better lives. And so what they're really doing is what I described in this sort of Smarter Planet theme. They're leveraging information. They're trying to make better decisions. They're trying to respond to things that are happening in the environment. And they're trying to, when I mentioned predictive, they're trying to anticipate things that will happen. I will give you a specific example of that. And the example is Rio de Janeiro. Our very first Smart City workshop in IBM was with the city of Rio. It was, how many people remember a couple of years ago there was a very bad mudslide in the favelas, flooding, a lot of people were killed. it was a disaster. It was a disaster on several levels. First of all, they didn't anticipate it, and secondly, the emergency response was very poor because the different city offices and departments didn't coordinate with each other. So we did a workshop with the city. Their stated goal was to be able to prevent deaths in the next flood, and a whole program and a whole product for IBM came out of that collaborative discussion about what to do about a very bad problem. So it turns out if you start collecting data about weather and about the movement of soil and about population centers and where people are and about emergency services and the different departments that might respond to something, you can both predict what the rainfall will be and you can coordinate the response from the city services and prevent that kind of disaster from happening again. Then, if you're a city that's anticipating a World Cup and an Olympics and you're thinking about crowd control and the amount of people coming into the airports and the travel on the roads, you start thinking about other ways that that kind of operational intelligence can help you become better informed and respond better and anticipate better. And so now we have something called the Intelligent Operations Center, which is basically a command and control center that was built together with business partners, some of them startup companies, IBM technology, our research labs in Rio, the city government, and so forth. And that center is now being sold with different variations to cities around the world. And you have examples here, Memphis and Sonoma County to manage water. You can look at transportation, and a lot of people use it for homeland security and different kinds of military operations, but also for, a lot of it is for public safety. So when we look at the entrepreneurial ecosystem and what's happening with venture capital investment, you take this context of Smarter Planet and smart cities and all of these new things that are happening, and there's a tremendous amount of opportunity because it is a disruption and there's change happening, and anytime there's that rapid change, there's opportunities for people to do something new, and there will be people who do very well by that. So the Smart Camp competition that Kenise referred to was our way of finding entrepreneurs who were aligned with this specific theme. That's why it's called Smart Camp. It's a boot camp for smart entrepreneurs who are building things for smarter cities and smarter planet. So every time we've held one of these competitions in a different city, you'd be shocked at the variety of companies that you find. And I will say, for those of you here, some corporate venture groups are very prescriptive. This is what our business is, this is what we think you could be doing, this is where we'd like to see you invest. That eliminates a delightful element of surprise. I would like to be surprised by the things that I find because I can't think of everything. So the very first competition we held, we found a company that was doing forestry management using Cognos, our a business intelligence product, and using lasers to measure what's in a forest, and therefore governments mostly own forests, by the way. So this company, Tree Metrics, was working with governments to tell them, don't cut down these trees because they're not straight, they're not big enough, they're not the right thing, or do cut down those because they meet your criteria. They now have a contract with the European Space Agency to monitor carbon that's sequestered in forests. So, would you go out and look for a company that did that if you were IBM? Well, no, I did not. There were lumberjacks from Cork, so that was very exciting. So we've had companies that do parking management, Streetline is local, companies that do traffic management, that look for toxins in water, that can predict what crowds will do in a city or in a business. It's just an incredible variety of things. And so, we get multiple things out of this. We get to work with an ecosystem and community in a particular locale, like Istanbul or Rio or Shanghai or New York or San Francisco. And we also, and therefore, strengthen our network and our connections and give something back to the community, but we also find really great companies who then become IBM business partners and are interesting for us for doing business. So we'll continue to do this. The program's 2 years old. We're already planning which cities to approach this year. We'll do a couple in major markets, a couple in emerging markets, and continue to find really fun things like lumberjacks from Cork So here's, I have 17 seconds left, we're right on time. Here's a couple of URLs for you where you can find out more about SmartCamp. SmartCamp is under an umbrella program called The Global Entrepreneur. And if you just go to IBM.com and search for startups, you can find that, and it's free to sign up. And if you do, you get coaching, you get mentors, you get technology, you get free software, and lots of good things that don't cost you anything and bring you into this community. So there you go, open innovation, new opportunities, how you tie into that, that's my story. Thank you.